the Assassin's Creed series is suffering a very public mid-life crisis. A series that leapt into the gaming world with a unique identity and distinct style is now stuck in a state of limbo. Its developer Ubisoft doesn't know whether to cash in on nostalgia for the original AC titles or eliminate all that which distinguished the series when it first emerged into the gaming consciousness as a titan of the stealth action genre. But finding a consensus on what went wrong and when this decline began is a far more difficult question to answer. The most common complaint directed towards Ubisoft, especially before Mirage, was sexual harassment. Sorry, that was the employees, not the fans. I'll get back to the game. For many, the series' decline begins with its transition from a more linear action game with a strong focus on stealth to a standard Ubisoft open-world RPG with Assassin's Creed Origins. Transitioning to an open-world model brings with it many advantages over a more linear format. By design, open worlds offer players a level of freedom and breadth of content that would be impossible in a more linear, contained experience. In the case of AC, this not only enabled a far wider scope than traditionally seen in the city-based model, but it meant that parts of the map could be brought to life with side quests. At least in theory. And this is where I think fan dissatisfaction mostly stems from. You see, the execution just wasn't there. Even the greatest open world games have inherent limitations. Much like a deal with the devil, the freedom in open worlds always comes at a cost. Developers cannot literally allow players to do whatever they want in whatever order with whatever frequency because they would have to create all this content and are constrained by time, money, and most importantly, sanity. But at the same time, this illusion cannot feel like it's an illusion because freedom and breadth is the whole point of open world design. Therefore, to develop an open world requires a high degree of care to ensure that systems are created that definitely incentivize or outright prevent certain players from accessing certain content without breaking immersion, while also ensuring that wherever you venture, you're not punished for your choices. In other words, the opposite of the Ubisoft approach. Much to the displeasure of Assassin's Creed fans, Ubisoft just doesn't believe in things like long development cycles, quality control, and innovation. Instead, they like taking the easy way out. Ubisoft asks, why dot the map with unique content that makes every inch of its world feel alive when you can fill it with checkpoints, markers, and badly written narratives that can be copy and pasted over and over again in every new region? They also ask, why enable players to explore the game world and tackle its narrative with a refreshing level of complexity and freedom when you could just level cap things? Now, not only does this understandably feel artificial, but it represented a complete divergence from the skill-based stealth formula pioneered by the first title in the series that gave the Assassin's Creed series a unique sense of identity. And on top of that, injected a strong dosage of tedium. In Odyssey and Origins, it took the form of side content, and in Valhalla, the copy-paste regional storylines that make up the bulk of the main content. Now, understandably, seeing how far they've diverged and how far, in many respects, the quality has declined, or at least the appeal has shifted, many have naturally called for a return to the classic linear stealth formula. Now, until recently, I also thought this was a solution until I played Mirage. You see, Mirage on paper should have worked. It had all the conditions for a classic Assassin's Creed experience. The gameplay, narrative structure, and in-game world were basically ripped straight from the Ezio era formula. But the reality of playing the game was vastly different. After I played it, I just couldn't pinpoint why, until I made a momentous decision to venture back to a fan favorite and classic of the series, Assassin's Creed 2. In the first hour back in, I instantly felt something I wasn't used to when playing Assassin's Creed games nowadays. And it had nothing to do with the combat or capture the flag missions. It was intrigue. I was actually interested in the totality of the story and characters, and how the present time and Renaissance stories would combine to form a single tapestry. You see, long before the days where modern sequences felt a burden continued simply as a means to keep up the facade that the series will ever end, in classic titles like Assassin's Creed 2, the storylines reeked with narrative potential. The modern sequences felt like they were going somewhere, like the directors and writers had a clear vision for how they would integrate the present and the past into the future of the series. Experiencing this unusually cohesive narrative for an Assassin's Creed series that has diverged so far away from the focus that it no longer, deals with assassination, gave me an insight into where the series went wrong in the first place, and why Mirage was not the fix. The lack of narrative focus. Now, I'm not saying that every change was a waste of time, nor that I didn't like Valhalla or Odyssey. They were decent games, but they just lacked a clear sense of narrative identity, the sort of identity that would make them memorable. Not only did this abandonment of focus affect the overarching narrative, but the quality of minute-to-minute character interactions. Main characters like Ezio, Altair, and their cast of supporting figures often persisted in multiple games, and thus developers were able to fully flesh out and develop their journey. This means that not only the story is solid in the traditional Assassin's Creed games like AC2, but the dialogue is fun. Interactions are fun, engaging, humorous, and full of genuine life. Just watch this.
You have my thanks.
Keep the sword, Ezio.
Do I know you from somewhere?
Don't you recognize me? It's me, Mario!
Uncle Mario?
It's been too long, Nipote. Far too long. I heard what happened in Firenze. Terrible. Come, let's get you all away from here.
Yes, the villains can be slightly boring and Machiavellian,
I do not know what you mean.
but Ezio's tragic journey perfectly leaps from point to point. Now you might be thinking at this juncture, you've talked about everyone's favourite Assassin's Creed game without mentioning assassination. And that's for a reason. You see, playing Mirage and then AC2 taught me one thing. The classic parkour and stealth formula was never enough. At the time, this didn't subtract from what AC represented, a breath of fresh air, but without the legendary character narrative of Altair and Ezio, as demonstrated by Mirage, it's harder to excuse its more anachronistic aspects. At this stage, I was thinking naturally, I've got things, haven't I? I understand why Mirage went wrong, I understand what's happened to the series, but I still lack the question of why. Why did the Assassin's Creed series diverge so substantially from its initial focus? So I decided to do some research, and this is where shit gets fun and wild. The story starts with the foundation of the series. Assassin's Creed was the brainchild of French-Canadian game designer Patrice Désilets. He concocted the idea of an order of assassins while working on a Prince of Persia title, but when he realized it just didn't work for the prince, decided to instead create a whole game around the concept. As he puts it, we're in January 2004. Just finished the Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time in November of the year before, and so I come back from vacation, Christmas holidays, and I'm asking, okay, what's next? And I was told, let's just do a Prince of Persia, but for the next generation of consoles. So in 2004 January, we don't know what the new generation of consoles will be, right? We have no clue that the PS3 will be a PS3 and 360 will exist. And I received a mandate, so it's like Prince of Persia Next Generation, but try to redefine the action-adventure genre into the next generation of platforms. This is how it all started. And by GDC 2006, the name Assassin's Creed had been finalized for this new IP. Désilets developed his concept of Assassin's Creed by combining the real tenets of the historical Ismailid faith and the Prince of Persia. In his vision, Assassin's Creed was about freedom. No longer was stealth confined to the shadows, but integrated into a narrative and world that enabled players to move with freedom. As he puts it, when I first started studying the Assassins, right, they existed for real, the Ismailian faith and group, and so their motto was, nothing is true, everything is permitted. And I said, that's great for a game. Well, it's great for life, by the way, but it's perfect for our game. So the Assassin's Creed is really important. People tend to forget the creed, and the creed is what the franchise stands upon. That you can do whatever you want in an Assassin's Creed game. Even though there's a story, there's you're not being dragged but pulled into this narrative, but somehow you can be any character you want. You can play with it any way you want. Not only did this new series have a good concept, a strong gameplay DNA, but also a narrative, an ending. Now, as I said before, this is where things get crazy. And the exact details of this narrative were not pieced together by myself, but by a PhD student, Lars de Wilt, based on his interviews with AC3 creative director Alex Hutchinson, who was involved in early development, and Désilets himself. And as I said before, they don't disappoint. You see, the original plan was for a trilogy that ends with Desmond using the combined knowledge of Altair and Ezio to take down Abstergo with Lucy, after which they escape from Earth to form a new civilization in space. Now, I'm not saying that the series should head into space next game and end, or even that this was a remotely good idea and doesn't sound a bit mental, but at least it shows some sort of narrative vision and purpose beyond commercial incentives. Something that is so lacking nowadays that in retrospect, Désilets sees the Amos as a great marketing technique. Now, partly, people are right that this was a product of the shift to an open world RPG format, but many other open world titles are renowned for their strong narratives and character development. In many cases, having a wider breadth of content opens up the possibility for grander stories and more character development, not less. But unless Ubisoft finds Assassin's Creed's identity again, the series will become somewhat lost in the wilderness for years to come. This 2014 quote by the narrative director of Valhalla, Darby DeWitt, really sums things up. There are just so many possibilities, we don't want to definitely end the universe. But we can have storylines that have endings. The end of the Desmond trilogy changed slightly, but it was always intended to end that way. And then about 2 years ago, we planned for another story, but we've moved on from specifically defining when a story will end. And I'm not going to make the same mistake for this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. If you didn't, well,